Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our podcast, Future Desk with Emily Labs AI Academy. This is the space where we explore how AI is shaping the future across different domains, and today we are diving into a topic that impacts all of us: education. Our theme for today is AI in modern education, where we'll be discussing how AI is transforming the way students learn right from the school level to the higher education and beyond. And I'm truly delighted to introduce our guest for today, Dr. Romana Gulshani. She's a visiting faculty at IIM Bangalore, IIM Raipur, and IIM Jammu, and brings with her rich experience in teaching HRM to MBA and executive MBA students. With her deep understanding of both education and industry, we're excited to hear her insights on how AI is influencing learning, skill development, and future career readiness. So let's get started. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am.
Walaikum salam.
Welcome to our podcast. So, ma'am, as you know that AI is already transforming almost every industry today. So, from your perspective, how do you see AI reshaping the overall education landscape, both in terms of teaching and learning?
Well, thank you, Hina, for inviting me for this. Really happy to be here. So, when you talk about education, I think overall AI is going to reshape the entire education sector.
Exactly.
And this applies not just to school level, college level, even at higher education. So, the way I think about it is under three subtopics. Firstly, in terms of the changing role of the educator, right? With AI, there are certain things that you can achieve which you wouldn't have thought of earlier, right? Today, when you think about education, and especially you think about what can the educator bring for the students, right? With AI is personalization, first of all. If you compare it with how education was some years back. Right? You're looking at a very general approach for everybody. You're looking at a teacher coming in, delivering a lecture, right? And it doesn't matter if the different students in the class are at a different pace of learning, right?
Exactly.
If they are actually able to understand what the teacher is trying to say right? In a very simple language. But today, when you think about education being enabled by AI tools, you're looking at teachers having this ability to actually design curriculum basis on the needs of these students. And if there is a need for one student to actually go back, revise, look at a concept in more detail, it can be done today, right? You're looking at personalization. You're also looking at in terms of what is it that you're getting from education, the value. Now, if you take a student perspective, right, you're looking at not just maybe some time back, it was more about, okay, do I have this information? How can I get or how can I access this information? But today we are moving on because you have enough information, especially with AI tools, right?
Right.
Anyone in this world, anywhere can access any information which is available in some form or the other, through AI tools. So now, as a student, I think you are moving to the next level, which is about applying what you have learned, which is about critically evaluating what you have learned, both in terms of concepts, in terms of real life application. So I think both in terms of the educator's role and how students are going to benefit, how students need to also change their approach towards education is going to change. And we are going to witness that in the next few years.
So, ma'am, you have closely worked with MBA and executive students across institutions like IIMs. How are you seeing AI change the way students in higher education learn, research, and prepare for careers?
Okay, yeah, truly, I have experienced that. In fact, I'll start by talking about my own example of doing PhD around 5 to 8 years back. And I'll give an example of a process in your doctoral journey which you take up, which is reviewing the literature. Now, if you think about it today, I think when you talk to maybe a PhD scholar today, it would be so different. I can imagine that because at our time, almost the first 6 months to 1 year would actually take up in reviewing literature, in reading through papers, and trying to understand what is going to be the specific research problem that I will be looking at. But when I think about it today, and I actually wanted to talk to some PhD scholars and see how they're looking at it, because now I am assuming that this entire 6 months to 1 year process can actually be reduced to a few days.
Right.
Because you have these AI tools with you, right, which can look at thousands of papers, right, actually summarize them for you, and even give you maybe a broader level structure of how you want to approach a research question, right? So this is one side which is, I think, exciting, especially when you think about research. In fact, today when I talk to my fellow researchers, right, and they tell me that yes, the entire process seems to have become so efficient now. However, at the same time today, it seems that the quality has maybe gone down in terms of the kind of problems that we are looking at, or the kind of frameworks that we are coming at. So again, something from my personal experience which I feel, because there could be something in terms of maybe also the generation that we have been part of, and the kind of students that you're looking at today. So our generation is a generation wherein we actually did this work of going to the library, looking for a research journal, right? Opening up these books and doing all that effort. But today you certainly have access to that. However, you also need to take a step back, which I'll talk about later, in terms of, how can you still do well as a student, even with access to AI tools with you. How can you still keep that curiosity alive? How can you still keep that critical evaluation factor alive? I'll talk about that later. But as of now, I see overall, again, change in terms of how maybe a PhD scholar is approaching it today to the way we did it. Now, if you talk about higher studies, right, I've interacted with students of MBA, executive MBAs a lot, and I do find them, they're already aware, they're already experimenting with a lot of AI tools, be it about preparing for presentations, summarizing content, right? They are there, they're exploring, they're experimenting. However, at the same time, I feel there is a gap in terms of them understanding how and how do these AI tools work, and secondly, how they can apply them in their context. I would still feel that there is a gap, and there is a lot of upskilling that is still needed. And I think there's a gap which can be filled, especially by someone like me, say, for example, for my HR students, right? That's what I'm always trying to bridge. I talk to them and I tell them that, here are these AI tools that you have come across, that you're already exploring. Now let's go to the next step and see how you can apply them in your context, because that's important.
Yes.
That's very important, yes.
So ma'am, if we bring this down to the school level students, what role do you think AI can play in shaping their learning habits early on? And do you think students today are using AI in the right way?
Okay, so I'll break it down, this question. And I think for the first part, again, it's exciting to see what AI can bring, especially for students at a school level. Which is, these are the years when actually their learning approach is also formed. So firstly, in terms of the positive side, I feel that AI tools can again bring that personalization which is needed. They can provide instant feedback to students. Again, they can also live up to the curiosity level of students, right? At school maybe for a teacher, they might reach that level of fatigue that, I cannot answer any more questions. But when you look at AI tools, they're not going to get tired. Exactly. Students can ask any follow-up questions any number of times, right? And get answers for their questions. Also, when you look at students who are needing help, right? Maybe there was a concept that was maybe taught in the 6th standard and the student is not really clear, say a concept in maths, something like that. And you're teaching the student in 7th and you find that, the student lacks some fundamental understanding of some concept. As a teacher, you could just hand over that to your AI assistant and be like, just for this set of students, revise this concept, bring more examples, share more examples, or even check understanding of the student, which is great, I think. This is something that in the traditional way of teaching wouldn't have been able to be, achieved, because again, right, with limited bandwidth, limited resources. I think that is one exciting way in which AI can really help, especially at the school level. Also, maybe making it more fun. Something we wouldn't have taught in the traditional setup of classrooms. Exactly. But now I think with things moving on, you will see that in the future, the entire way you teach in a class is going to change. It could bring more fun elements for students, could make it more exciting, and also could make it more real life in terms of simulations, right? When you think about science, Maybe if, you would take students to a lab, in our time when we were in schools. But now you're looking at virtual labs, now you're looking at simulations, and in a very simple way, right? You're not looking at some huge investments and then helping students see it, see how an astronaut, for example, goes into space and, what is there to explore. But you can, in a very simple, very easy, very cost-free way, actually bring this experience to the classroom,
students,
which is great. But on the other side, again, I always talk about use of AI with caution, right? You're looking at these students who could think of AI as a shortcut, right? And especially
We're
school level.
We're going to talk about this in the next segment.
Yes, right? So we have to be very careful there. And I think both teachers and parents have a role there, right? How can they help the students to understand that use this tool as an assistant, but not as a way of solving all your problems. Not as a shortcuts, right? So that is important. So again, I think it's exciting, but with a word of caution, which is very important.
Right. So ma'am, like we talked about, there's also a growing concern that students may become over-dependent on AI tools. So in your opinion, how can students strike the right balance between using AI as a support tool and actually developing their own thinking and problem-solving skills?
I think that's a very important and relevant question to answer. And I think, personally, I feel like there are 3 steps to it. Firstly, when you're actually helping your students to understand, you have a problem for which they're looking for a solution, before they actually turn to AI tools, let them think independently. That's the first step, right? Let them apply their minds, let them understand, can we think of a solution?
On our own.
Maybe in a very general sense, maybe at a very broad level, right? Before they actually go ahead and start, typing all their prompts or asking the AI for answers, things. So that first step is very important. Secondly, evaluating the output of the AI, right? Asking questions such as, is this accurate, right? Does this make sense? Something like, is it relevant, the answers that you're getting? Because we know, right, there could be some bias, there could be errors because of hallucination, some of the problems that we already know exist with AI tools. So the second step would be to evaluate the output.
Responses from
critically evaluate the responses of the AI tool. And finally, third one would be to understand whether the answers that you're getting, are they aligned with your context? So which is what I talk to even my students, right? Say, for example, my HR students. But I think this is something we can even apply to school level students, right? When you think about AI tools, right? Whenever I talk to students, their general understanding is good. But when it comes to actually making it
context-based,
in line with their context, with the problem, right? Then they have to learn this skill. It has to be, that is how you will actually be able to leverage AI tools. You're not getting answers which are general, broad. You're getting answers which are accurately designed with some constraints, right? Again, going back to how you have actually maybe created the prompt. What are your skills in terms of interacting with AI? Also coming back to understanding, do we at least have a basic understanding of how did this AI tool actually come up with this answer? Something like that.
Right.
So I also wanted to touch upon here, because this question is very relevant in terms of what are the kind of key skills that students would need, even at, MBA students, college level students, executives would need. So some top skills that, are there that need to be looked at, especially in the future when you're going to see the use of AI even more than today, are really something like, on top is your analytical ability, right? It is going to be there. I tell my students also, if you're looking at building a career and today you're thinking about, am I going to be irrelevant? What should I be working on? Something like understanding how this AI works. Your literacy in terms of, how these models actually come up with the answers. Something like prompting, again, a very important skill that you would need to know, right? Something even like, other social skills, for instance, empathy, for instance, resilience, for instance, critical thinking, they are all going to be still very relevant.
Exactly.
So if students are looking at, increasing their proficiency in terms of, do I need to understand AI? Do I get a degree in machine learning? Things like that. But keep in mind that these other skills are also going to be very relevant, important. Especially when you think about analytical ability, when you think about applying AI tools to different contexts. For me, when I talk to HR students, I'm talking about HR, I'm talking about business, right? Do you understand how you can apply these to actually solve real world business problems. Something like that for students also, right? So I think all these skills are going to be very relevant, and you have to strike a balance. And I said the three, as I said, right, the 3-step approach of firstly thinking independently, critically evaluating the output,
responses,
right, and trying to see if the responses are in line with the context of your problem that you're trying to solve. I think that approach is a great approach that students can think of.
So, ma'am, I'm going to conclude by asking you that you recently conducted a 2-day workshop on AI applications in HR at IMT Hyderabad. Could you share some insights from that experience? I mean, what key takeaways stood out for you?
It was overall a great experience. In terms of takeaways, again, when I look at students, in the workshop, there were students who were very excited about AI. Then there were some students who were apprehensive. But overall, the mindset was that, they were ready to kind of, understand how to apply.
Hands-on.
They were wanting to be hands-on. So that was great. But in terms of more for me as an educator, what I found out was that there was this gap from awareness to actually implementation or capability in a way. So in general, as I talked about earlier also, right? Students were very keen. They had some understanding. They had already done some level of experimentation. But specifically when you think about HR problems, right? They did not have that level of understanding, right? Okay, here, are my tools, but then here are real life problems in the domain of HR. How am I going to bridge this gap? I think that's really where I wanted to help them. And which is something which I also got as a feedback that part was actually very important for them, right? Right. So bridging this gap was important for them. They were excited about it. So that's what they told me later. So I think in that ways, it was very important for me to bring this understanding to them, and I think that is also something that will continue, especially for domain experts. Like me, for example, I'm coming in from HR, right? I can help people understand that, how can you actually leverage AI tools in, different HR functions. For instance, if you want to talk about recruitment, selection, performance management, strategic manpower planning, something like this, right? However, another gap that I found with students was that even though they could relate to some of these problems in HR, say for example, but again, in terms of integration with business was a challenge, right? So they wanted to resolve a problem, and they had this focus, they had this mindset, but then again, they had questions around, okay, how do I look at integrating these solutions to other functions in the business, which is, I think, something which is still going on. And, I think we haven't yet resolved it. We will still need to work on understanding. Even when I talk to different people working in different organizations, they still say that our solutions for AI are kind of limited. They are fragmented. We are looking at more integration across different business functions, and which we will achieve, hopefully. But I think we are at a very early stage in that. But overall, I feel that, again, in terms of upskilling, there is a gap, especially when you look at, professionals. For me, it's HR professionals, right? Similarly for other domains. So I think, so overall, in terms of upskilling, there is a gap in, again, if you talk to professionals, for me, it's HR professionals, but you could look at others as well around you, that they're looking at bridging this gap in terms of firstly having literacy in terms of the technology, but then how do you apply it to your context, be it in sales, be it in marketing, be it in HR, right? You're looking at bridging this gap, which I think opens up a lot of roles, different roles that are going to come up in the future, not just in HR, overall business. I think there are some exciting roles. Also, when you think about answering this question of, how can you responsibly and ethically adopt AI in your organization? You're looking at different roles in terms of, for instance, in HR, we look at an ethics officer, right? We look at data privacy, confidentiality. You're looking at people who can actually work with business analysts and help them give key input in terms of when they're actually coming up with different models, right? When we talk about generative AI, for instance. So a lot of upskilling is required, and you're going to see some very new, different kind of roles come up, which were actually not there some years back. So in that ways, I'm really excited, and I'm also excited for the space in HR. And I hope I can reach out to as many professionals as I can, because I feel like, I'm there where I can understand, from one side, okay, what are we looking at in terms of solving HR problems? On the other side, you have your, AI tools, and sort of integrating is where I feel also my role is. And I think it's going to be an exciting space. So I'm looking forward to it.
So thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. It was really exciting to hear from you, and I hope all our students get benefited by whatever kind of insights that you have provided to us. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Hina, for inviting me, and also thank you to Emily Labs Academy. I see the work that you guys are doing. I'm really excited for you guys. All the best, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
And to all our listeners, we hope this episode gave you a fresh perspective on how AI is transforming education and how you can make the most of it in your own learning journey. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it with your friends. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring the future with AI. This is Future Desk with Emily Labs AI Academy, signing off. See you in the next episode.